Hey folks, welcome back. And in this part 6, we're going to talk about business continuity. So what is business continuity and business continuity planning? Really that comes down to what is the business going to do in the event of an emergency or some type of action that potentially takes the business out of commission for a period of time. And when we look at how we plan for business continuity, there's a project scope and planning. Then you go to the business impact analysis, often called the BIA. You determine that, or you create that continuity planning, you approve it, and then you implement it. So these plans, you want to have them on the shelf and ready to go in case of emergency. You don't want to be making decisions, especially difficult decisions about getting the business back online in the middle of a crisis. So this is true not just with business continuity, but with security in general and with engineering in general, is that the time that you don't want to be creating a plan is in the middle of some type of event that requires planning. You want to have that done ahead of time so you can pull it off the shelf and at least have a framework in hand to handle the issue that's come up. Now, business continuity is something that you try to create you try to think about as many of the possibilities that could occur, but obviously you're not going to be able to think of everything. So there's a couple different parts of the scope and planning of the business continuity. So you want to look at the structured review, create a team, assess resources, and then determine the impact from a legal and regulatory standpoint. So from a structured review, you want to identify all the departments and individuals that are part of that process, that business continuity process. Most likely that's going to be your operational departments, your support services, security teams, your executives, and so forth. Now, these are the people that are going to be required to be components or pieces of that business continuity plan. And then you want to create a team. So you want to create a team that is responsible and has ownership of the business continuity plan. These representatives should be from multiple different functions within the organization, including technical experts. So you don't want to just have it all business people. You want to make sure you have technical people as part of that team as well to make sure that the plan is sound and can be technically implemented. Security teams will have to have a part in this as well, because there is components of things like physical security, especially if you're trying to deal with some type of an issue like maybe something that happened to the building, if your organization is all housed in one single building and there is, let's say, an event that takes out the building, a fire or some other type of a flood or something of that nature. Physical security is going to have to be involved to make sure that the personnel get out and that they need to be part of that planning. And then you also want to make sure that you have HR, legal, public relations, and senior management all as part of that team as well, because with legal, HR, public relations, there's going to be a lot of communication that's going to need to be made to internal employees as well as external stakeholders, your customers, and so forth. And then you want to assess your resources. So, you want to be able to create that plan with the business continuity planning team, as well as the support staff. You want to also have testing, training, maintenance, different components of that are going to need to be created. So, that's going to require the people that are part of that team to actually create that testing, that training, that maintenance. And then the implementation is also going to require resources in order to implement the plan should you need to execute the plan in case of an emergency. So all of these, you want to make sure that you know what the resources are that are going to be part of the ongoing development, the maintenance, and getting everybody up to speed on it. But then again, of course, you want to know who's going to be part of that business continuity should disaster occur. And then the last part about the scope and plan here is that you may have legal, contractual, or regulatory requirements that state that you have to maintain a business continuity plan in order to be in business. This is not uncommon, especially for a lot of organizations that have national implications. So financial systems, military and things like that, they have they're a critical national component, and therefore they are required to maintain a business continuity plan. So about a business impact analysis, or a BIA, and this is really that the processes that are critical to the business's ability to operate. So when anything threatens that capability that the business has, you want to identify those threats and know what the impact is to the business should that threat materialize. There's two ways that you can do a business impact analysis. There's the quantitative assessment, which is really using numbers to back up the analysis. And then there's the qualitative impact analysis, which is more an easy way to think about it is gut feeling. But you also may do this through, anonymous forms or other types of ways of soliciting feedback from people without actually getting metrics. So in other words, you're asking questions, a questionnaire that'll ask questions about what the impact is to the business should a threat occur. That's more qualitative because it's not backed by numbers. It's more backed by somebody saying, hey, if we lose this part of this business, it's going to have a critical impact on the organization as a whole. That's not really backed by numbers. That's backed by somebody's feeling or sense. So what about the priorities? As we look at the business impact analysis, we're starting to do this planning here. So it really depends on the business when it comes down to trying to identify the priorities that should be addressed as part of the business continuity. If you're in a financial institution or if you are in the financial space, you may have different priorities compared to an organization that's in healthcare or in the government. You're going to have a little bit different priorities on getting your organization back to normal. And so, a financial industry is probably going to want to make sure that all of its, the tools that its customers use to access their money, those are going to be the things that are going to be probably a priority for a financial organization. Healthcare, it's going to be making sure that the patients are being taken care of and that there's no concern about loss of life. So when we look at that quantitative assessment, and again, quantitative means there's numbers that back it up. You're looking at a few things. There's asset value, and the asset value is going to be, it has to be put into monetary terms. In other words, this set of data in this database is worth X amount of dollars. And then there's a couple other items that we want to look at in terms of the quantitative assessment. There's the maximum tolerable downtime, and that means how long can the business function with a component being down before there's irreparable harm. The recovery time objective and the recovery point objective are somewhat related, but the recovery time objective is how long the amount of time it would take for the business function to actually recover. So how much time is it going to take for this component as part of the business to get back online? It could be measured in minutes, could be measured in seconds, could be measured in days. And then the recovery point objective is how much time that a function would be able to recover data from. So if you're doing backups at every 15 minutes or something like that, that means your recovery point objective is 15 minutes. You could lose, in the case of an outage or something like that, you might lose 15 minutes worth of data. And if you're a e-commerce site or if you're a financial organization, 15 minutes might be a pretty long time for you to be not able to recover data. And then there's some risks that we want to identify when we look at the priorities in the way that we are trying to understand this impact analysis. So there's natural risks that occur, and there's people-made types of risks that can occur. This isn't an exhaustive list. There's obviously a lot of that goes into it, but some examples here are those natural disasters, storms, earthquakes, lightning, volcano, flood, pandemic. And then person-made, you have theft, you have fires, you have power outage, terrorist attacks, economic crisis, and so forth. So there's a few things we're going to talk about here with in terms of measuring impact and likelihood. There's the annualized rate of occurrence. So this is something, and again, we're still sticking to this quantitative type of analysis here. But an annualized rate of occurrence means how often does something like this occur? If you are in a flood-prone area, maybe you see floods in your area once a year. Maybe it's twice a year. So you know that on average you're seeing floods once a year, and you can then start using that as part of the equation when you start trying to understand what the impact is of a given threat. The single loss expectancy is the loss in each instance of a risk occurring. So let's stick with the flood. If the flood is happening once a year, how much would you lose in that annual flood? And the formula for that is taking the asset value and multiply that by the exposure factor. So how exposed are you to that threat, and what is the asset value that would be impacted by that threat? So just take an example here, a server worth $1,000 and there are 20 in a building that is prone to flood. So the asset value is $20,000. Now we're keeping it simple here because there's costs associated with the building as well. But let's say you're more concerned about losing the servers. So you say that each server is $1,000, there's 20 servers in the building, and if a flood occurs, you could lose $20,000 if the entire building was destroyed, or if the entire set of 20 servers in that building were destroyed. So you hire some consultants, they come in, they determine that a flood would damage about 50% of the building before your controls would come in place, and you would be able to recover the other 50%. So you can say your exposure factor here is 50%. And so what that means is that the single loss expectancy for this given scenario would be about $10,000 in damage. So then with the annual loss expectancy, so again, this takes into consideration the annual rate of occurrence. You could say that the annual loss expectancy would be the loss that is based on the annual rate of occurrence times the single loss expectancy. And let's say you have a 10% chance of this occurring. It's not once a year. It's a 10% chance that this would occur. That really means that your annual loss expectancy is around $100. So now, again, this is the scenario that we're talking about here with a flood and a simple kind of example here. But keep in mind that this isn't going to tell you that every year every year that you're going to lose $100 to flood. It's just a way for you to measure your controls in comparison to what the actual threat is. So when it comes down to the planning, we've already done our scope and plan, we've done our business impact. Now it's going to be continuity planning. And part of that continuity planning, there's two pieces to that. There's the strategy development. This is what risks will be addressed based on the previous exercises that we've done. So if you know that, again, you have a building with 20 servers in it, and those 20 servers, there's $100 worth of damage that could occur on an annual basis, maybe you're not that concerned about that risk. But you may have done this exercise on a couple other parts of your business, and you find out that, well, some of the areas of our business do have a much higher rate of occurrence, much higher annual loss expectancy. So therefore, you're going to prioritize your security controls and your continuity planning around making sure that you reduce that risk. So then with the provisions and processes, you're going to design those procedures and mechanisms for actually mitigating that risk to reduce it or eliminate it if you can. And that'll include protection of people, building, and infrastructure. So the people, your employees and the staff and the people that work around your component of the business, the building that component is housed in or a part of, and then the infrastructure that supports that component are all part of that, what you're trying to develop for mitigation. And the last step here is to approve and implement. So the approval is really going to go up to the top. You want to have the senior leadership sign off on the approval of the business continuity plan. And then you want to actually implement that plan. And that's through, you could be doing testing and exercises. Tabletop exercises are common. You want to have a continuous review. Sometimes it might just be annual, sometimes more frequently. But the business continuity team should be working with the different stakeholders to actually do a continuous review of that business continuity plan to make sure that it's still valid, that the risks are still identified appropriately, and that the controls are still in place and working. And you want to do a risk assessment, which includes acceptance and mitigation. So you're going to look at all the risks that are potentially going to impact your business. You want to make sure that the appropriate owners have accepted that risk, or that the appropriate controls are in place to mitigate that risk. And with that, thank you for your time. Talk to you later.